George Washington, our first president. It was a cold winter morning on February 22nd, 1732. This was more than 200 years ago. Inside a Virginia farmhouse, where it was cozy and warm, a special baby boy was born. The baby's name was George Washington. As little George grew up, he loved the farm and all of the animals. He loved his horse best of all. George had 2 older brothers who lived away. He lived with a younger sister and 3 brothers. They followed George's every move. "Let's play follow the leader," said Betty. "George is the leader," said John. Samuel and Charles agreed. George went to a small country school. He worked very hard. He was one of the smartest students. George was also the most honest boy in school. He grew up very fast. He was bigger and taller than all of the other boys. Everyone looked up to George. Sometimes George would choose games for his classmates to play. "George is a natural-born leader," his schoolmaster would say. In school, George liked to read and write. He liked numbers, but he liked to make maps and measure land best of all. This is called surveying. George practiced by measuring the vegetable gardens on his farm. Many farmers wanted George to survey their land. It would help them know how much seed to buy when it was time to plant their crops. George was only a boy of 16, but the farmers trusted him. They knew George was very smart and honest. "He will do a perfect job," one farmer said to another. George's big brother, Lawrence, took him on a surveying trip in the Virginia wilderness. They stayed many cold and rainy days and nights. There were many wild animals. George learned how to take care of himself in the woods. Living in the wilderness helped George to become an even greater leader. When he was only 20 years old, he became a major in the Virginia Army. In 1754, a war broke out. French settlers and Native Americans in the Ohio Valley would not let the English settlers have farms there. George Washington was called to help the English settlers. One day, George met a lovely lady named Martha Custis. She was a widow with 2 children. They fell in love and were married in 1759. George and Martha moved into a beautiful mansion in Mount Vernon, Virginia. They had many parties, laughter, and fun in their home. But Washington was soon called to war again. It was 1775. America was a very small country with only 13 colonies then. During this time, England ruled America. The rulers in England were mistreating America. They wanted America to pay unfair taxes. A war broke out. The Americans chose George Washington as their leader. The war lasted 8 years. George Washington was now a general. Through his leadership, the American colonies won the war. America was no longer ruled by England. The colonies became the United States of America. Americans were very happy, but the new little country needed a leader. Everyone in the land wanted one and only one man for this job, General George Washington. So they made him the first president of the United States of America on April 30th, 1789. On the day of his inauguration, President George Washington rode on a beautiful white horse on his way to the ceremony. "Hooray!" the people cheered when the president stood before them to give his speech. Some people cried with joy. President Washington was a great president. He traveled all over America to see what the country needed. He passed good laws to help Americans. George Washington was president for 8 years. Afterward, he went back to his home in Mount Vernon. He enjoyed good times and laughter again with Martha, his family, and friends. Americans will never forget the first president of their land.